Recently, at my editor's house in Taunton in Somerset, southwest of England, after our usual delightful dinner, a Nigerian colleague who works for Newsweek magazine asked a very tricky question about political leadership in the context of political manifesto that is presented to voters by politicians in a global context. His point was whether those manifestos not just mistake and make assumptions about how easy it is going to be to govern if and when they win power, or whether it's a massive fraud on the people generally. I will not go into details about this discussion because it was a global discussion, including America, UK, and all that. But an English journalist, a pro-European journalist, to put it that way, came out with a very strong argument about Brexit. It was an heated debate or conversation. Like I said, it will take my time to talk about that particular, very fantastic, interesting discussion. And I can also tell you that whilst we were debating whether it is a deliberate mistake or a guided deception by politicians to gain power, many bottles of whiskey, gin, white rum, brandy, and of course, Guinness suffered that evening. Many people, including myself, can argue that the concept of a mistake versus a deception can be quite challenging. In many cases, there are distinctions, a slight difference, or some would say a shade or a hint that informs your judgment or help your judgment to decide whether an action, a pronouncement, or a statement, or a manifesto, these things were just a mistake, an assumption, or a fraud on the part of the politician. A mistake is generally an error or a misunderstanding that occurs without the intent to mislead. On the other hand, deception involves deliberately misleading or providing false information. That much I can argue. Our debate and conversation in a global context will continue. And this brings me straight to my conversation today in the context of Sierra Leone. And I will ask similar questions. In 2018, did the SLPP Paupa campaign made a mistake promising that they will manage the economy better than the APC under Ernest Koroma? Or was it a deception on their part? A big lie, in other words. Did JJ Safar bread and butter campaign was a foolish assumption that he go able to manage the economy better than the APC. Did Mr. Marabio assumed that because he was a military junta head of state for 2 months by default, he can govern Sierra Leone as a civilian president? That the British High Commissioner, Guy Warrington, deliberately forced a regime change on the people of Sierra Leone, thinking that he was doing the right thing? Or was it all part of a massive fraud, a deception that is now causing so much pain and suffering in the country? Let's leave that to history. But I hope history will be generous so that future generations will learn from them gigantic mistakes here and fraud, political fraud. Was it a mistake for the APC leadership in 2018 to assume that Samura Kamara would just disappear in thin air? I hope history will be a judge to that. You see, a lot of things are beating people's conscience now, as we sit down and watch the state of the country. Let's accept that Mr. Marabio won the election, but we'll leave that to history as well, whether it was a mistake on the part of the SLPP and the diplomatic corps to force Mr. Marabio down the throat of SierraLeoneans, and now he's suffocating the country. The country can't breathe. And then he tiffed the election 2023. And now people are debating, are discussing. They are having second thoughts, opinions as to what waiting for happen. Forgetting that SierraLeoneans are suffering. Are they saying that this man should stay and suffocate the country for the next 5 years? Without any shadow of a doubt, it was both a massive mistake and, in other cases, a massive fraud on the part of the SLPP Paupa campaign. One can argue that the British High Commissioner then, Guy Warrington, foolishly and arrogantly imposed himself as Lord Haw and threatened Ernest Koroma with all kinds of crimes. And that Ernest Koroma was cowardly enough to succumb to those threats, including threats from Mr. Marabio and his Paupa supporters, threatening that they will bring war to Sierra Leone if Marabio no win the election. Ernest Koroma had no choice, some will argue. Some will argue that he cowardly directed knowing fully well that it was the wrong decision, directed Ifa Ali to go ahead and read a false result that gave Mada Bio power. A victory it never deserved. Were these mistakes or deception? Whichever way you go, in my mind, these were monumental mistakes. And when you talk about mistakes, any mistakes, in most cases, even a small mistake, naos, let alone a mistake involving the lives of over 8 million people, narrow the next round of choices we must make. In fact, in some cases, as it is the case with Sierra Leone, that massive mistake, April 2018, foreclosed all hopes for Sierra Leone, all hopes of a better life. Mr. Mada Bio's coming to power in 2018 was a monumental mistake and a fraud. From the start of the campaign in 2017, the entire plan of the SLPP Power Party was how to win the argument, convince a gullible society knocked down by poverty, ignorance, and fear, and then how to force the hands of the international community, twist their hands to take over Sierra Leone. They had a plan for that, but they had no plans on how to govern the country. Now I make today contractors, they complain about government of Sierra Leone, bounce check, disgraceful.